Hello, everybody, and welcome to Two Marines in Kyiv. On my left is retired Marine Colonel Andy Milburn, former commanding officer of 1st Battalion, 3rd Marines, former regimental commander of MARSOC, Joint Combined Task Force commander in Syria and Iraq, and CEO of the Mozart Group here doing military training and other things in Ukraine. Along with us is Max, a Ukrainian colonel whose real name is not Max, but who's going to share some of his insights and who's been working alongside the Mozart Group.
And I'm going to introduce Andy Bain, also former Marine, former Lava Dog, was also in 1st Battalion, 3rd Marines by strange coincidence, has been in Ukraine for 30 years, and since 2014 has been running the Ukraine Freedom Fund, which is dedicated to raising funds for non-lethal means, supporting the Ukrainian military, and is doing so very effectively. And just another point on Max. Max is within the Ukrainian Special Operations Forces that have seen a rapid expansion since the beginning of the war.
So thank you very much. I am here like a guest, and I would like to say you thanks for the help that America today in war against Russia. My English is unfortunately not so good. But now I want to explain about our trainings that we organize with American instructors in Ukraine. It's very useful for us because we have a lot of people that want to be soldiers. And unfortunately, we don't have enough instructors because now we have a war. So experience that American soldiers had in Iraq, Syria, and other countries. It's very useful for us and very interesting to organize these trainings because it's not like a classical theory where teacher something right on the border by the markers, but it's discussion. It's discussion between instructors and our soldiers because our soldiers have different levels and different experience. We have groups who has good levels, and it's interesting not only for them to get something from American instructors. It's interesting for American instructors to get something from our soldiers. Because Ukraine now have a very difficult and very tragic war against big Russia army. And what personally for me interesting in these trainings, it's the basic way and basic relation in American army and in Soviet army. Russia army, it's
like
Soviet army. And basic different, it's that in American, in Western country, in key point on the war field is a soldiers. It's a man. In Soviet army, it's a technique.
It's platform. It's based on equipment.
It's a technique. And quite simple example. When we have a shooting training, and when magazine is empty, according to American rules, you put magazine on the ground and forgot about them, it. In Soviet army and Russia army, we have a special bag, and you should put this magazine in this bag. Empty magazine you should put in the bag. It's a time, it's a attention, it's short time, but it's seconds, maybe will be very dangerous for the life.
Difference between life and death.
Okay, it's quite simple example, but it illustrates a basic platform in a different between American and Soviet and Russia army.
You know, that reminds me of something that Danielle said too. By the way, just very quickly for the listeners, Max is in special operations, but the scale of the training problem is quite large. There's 15,000 members special operations. Max, someone was telling me the other day that the same thing, you know, as you guys are working out where your strengths are and the enemy's weaknesses are, it takes, for instance, 8 minutes for the thermals on a T-72 to warm up, right, to work when you turn up. So the Ukrainians realize that. And your thermals are almost instantaneous. You know, it's things like that. Those seconds really count.
Of course.
It's very clever.
Of course. It's very interesting training because when one of the organizers of this trainings I can look at how our soldiers transform and how our soldiers keep American knowledges about military activities.
Well, Max, you were saying the other day, because you're working closely with Andy and the Mozart Group, who are organizing a lot of the training. And you were talking the other day about how it was key that we differentiate both by group and by quality of person, the quality of training they'd already had. Because the first group of trainers that we brought in from the U.S., it was a mixed bag of people in the audience. And we had people with no experience and we had people with significant both training and combat experience. And you were highlighting, as Andy's team were doing the assessment, the group that you originally put in front of him were kind of a mixed bag. And you got that fixed now in terms of how we're going to segregate the training?
Yes. Now we only start this process. We have only 3 times we make some trainings, and now we have some experience, and this experience show us that we should separate groups according to the level of his knowledges. We have 0 level persons who want to go on the front and to go to war, but we have persons with higher level, so we should separate it, and we should train organized group.
Yeah.
One person, it could be like a sniper's training.
Yeah.
For in other activities, we should train groups.
Yeah.
Groups that in future will be on the field together, and we should make these trainings longer.
Yeah.
Because only one day we have on medical training.
Yeah.
It's approximately from 9 o'clock to 16 o'clock.
Yeah.
And it's a full day. And after 16, it will be not useful to make some other time.
Yeah.
To make some other activities. We discuss with Andy about this problem, and we know that we understand each other and understood each other, and we in future we make this process more effective.
Deliberate. It's a plan. And one thing we want to coordinate with you, Max, is the fact that training in Kyiv, we will continue that, but also we want to train closer to the front line. We talked about training, setting up nodes behind the Eastern Front and the Southeastern Front, right? And we plan that. We put teams out there, and they say that maybe 2 weeks. Maybe they're coming.
Before our meeting today, I have a call. I have a phone token with my partner, who now in close to the front line, and they have a lot of soldiers who would like to get this experience. And I tell about it, and so we plan visit there after we make some schedules, some agenda of this training.
We're talking about basically mobile training teams, putting them all on a bus or 2 SUVs, and then the core subjects would be marksmanship, sniping, tactics, medical. Explosives,
drones.
And it's interesting, how drones has become such an integral part of all the training. It really speaks to how the war is, how war has changed because of those.
Of course. I think it's very good experience. According to my opinion, your instructors, after visit there in Ukraine, should become back in United States and study this experience.
They're learning
in America, in a learning course in America, in the academy, in the military colleges.
Yeah.
Because it's not only American instructors studying our people, but my friends give for the American instructors some experience too.
Absolutely. And I can give a quick example of that, Max, that's just occurred in the last few days. The drones that United States has been providing, the short-range drones, we learn they're better than the DJ-1, but they still have shortfalls, camera resolution, right? Because they've got to fly above 300 meters, 400 meters in order to do so. They're not vulnerable, so the Russians can't hear them. But if they're that high, most of these platforms don't have camera resolution enough for target identification for even, so that was one. But also the techniques, tactics, procedures for launching drones without becoming a target, avoiding the Russians' systems like aeroscope, their counter-battery radar, which are they work very effectively, right?
So we can meet, if it possible, if it necessary, we can meet with high experience troop, your instructors. I can organize a meeting with a high-level troops. Because yesterday I met with some commander of these troops. For 1 month, they explosives. 400 Russian machines.
Russian machines?
Yes. Tanks.
Oh, tanks. Oh,
and other.
Yeah.
In different situations.
Yeah.
They
practice.
They change tactics according to the situation. And it will be interesting for the American instructors to talk with this person.
It'd be fascinating, and I'd like to join that conversation. Well, one thing that's interesting, though, is the people I've met, Ukrainians do not focus on patrolling. We've talked about ambush, we've talked about weapons employment, but not how to patrol, not how to get to the ambush site, not how to get back. And it seems that Hollywood has dictated how you do things. And the Russians don't do anything from what I can see on infantry tactics. So that's the advantage the Ukrainians have. But patrolling is, for listeners who don't know much about the infantry, patrolling is very complicated and requires a lot of planning. It's not just lining up and holding a weapon. But it's something the Ukrainians, I don't think, realizes how important it is. And it's something, a next stage of training I think we should get into.
Yeah, I mean, we talk about shoot, move, communicate, right, as being the three pillars of combat operations: shoot, move, communicate. But Max, to your point, sensing, seeing, finding, locating, right, is the fourth pillar. Drones, right, being able to locate where the enemy is something they work on. But yes, movement, you're right.
Yes, Ukrainian tactic is quite effective against Russia. Because at the small troops, a lot of techniques, explosives by the small troops, Ukrainian troops. And each of these troops generally have drones and have other small equipment. So it's very effective to javelins and low, and this quite effective stingers, for example. I know some examples how effective use stingers against Russian helicopters. So, and it will be very good that we to join this experience and prepare some instructions and some books maybe in future, like a general experience in each point of activities. For example, how is
lessons learned.
Yes, of course, yes. It we should to do.
My understanding of Army Special Forces, U.S. Army Special, they deal a lot with unconventional warfare and used to training partisans and guerrillas, which is kind of what we're involved in here, except for it's a full-on conventional war. So it's not necessarily a Green Beret. It's more, as most things, better taken over by Marines. But I don't know. What do you think about that, Andy?
Honestly, I think people get very caught up in UW doctrine, but what is happening here is unconventional warfare. But the line between unconventional and conventional warfare is so blurred. I'll give you an example. So what we're training Max's guys, there's a third probably of special operations, Max, correct me if I'm wrong, who are what you guys call and we call partisans, right? Their role originally was to, if the Russians invaded their area, they would strike at the Russians. Well, now we're training them to infiltrate, when the Russians are in their defense, infiltrate into Russian lines and strike them in small units. Well, those are conventional infantry skills, right? Though overall, the tactics we're using are infiltration, they're light infantry tactics. I don't know if that makes sense. So I'm just illustrating that.
We met up in Chernihiv, who were partisan units that had been behind the lines and successfully engaged, but they were being supplied because with conventional weapons, with the heavy anti-tank missiles, because the Russians had been unable to control any of the land. And the battlefield was fluid enough that supplies could come and go without too much hindrance.
Yeah, it's very interesting. Max, I was going to ask you about the value of, we're getting a lot of combat medics. We even have a doctor with experience in Afghanistan volunteering who wants to come out here. So I think going ahead, we've also got perhaps potential to talk about pushing treatment and evacuation, being able to assist with that. Do you think that's useful?
And it will useful, of course, and useful all medicines knowledges that have American doctors, paramedics, because it's a very useful course for each soldiers. And we talked with Andy before that we should transform our courses in a permanent process and a longer process, because if we will get American weapons, so it need for us to study how it functions. And we should organize some good executive process for our soldiers.
Building capacity.
Yes.
Not just simply training.
Of course.
Those require different training and different supply and different mentality about logistics.
Of course.
But the key thing is the logistical mindset has to change. And so it's not just, here's a different weapon, pull the trigger a different way. It's a complete different change to how warfare is fought. Clearly, I think it would be much more effective than what Ukraine is doing now. That said, Ukraine is very effective, so it'd just be an additional multiplier.
You said very interesting and very important point in things that we should change mentality.
Yeah.
So when we had one of the training, I admit that older man who served in Soviet Army or studied in Soviet Union, approximately it's older than 40, for example.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So about half Andy's age.
Yes. They had Soviet mentality.
Yeah.
And Soviet mistakes, how make some activities. So American way is very different from the Soviet. And so we should change mentality. And my example about magazines, about empty magazines, is it's only one side, only small one side that illustrate these differences.
I'll chime in though. I think that we can learn something from you when it comes to logistics and the Ukrainian. So in the United States, we're always trying to move iron mountains, these big, things, big convoys and things like this. Whereas as we work with your units, we learn that you are supplying in small packets.
Of course.
Yeah. A pickup truck or even drones carrying
It's our tactics, because if we war against Russia forces, in classical way, we will not win.
Yeah.
They have resources, they have factories, they have more people. So we should plan our activities, and it's a good way for us to maneuver in war, small troops, and logistic using not big column.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk about the sinking of the Moskva a couple of days ago. That, I was reading, was sunk by Neptune missiles, shore-to-the-ship missiles, which I understand are designed, manufactured, fully made in Ukraine. And so it was a Ukrainian weapon system that the total value of the weapons program has so far been about $93 million. And it's paid off just by sinking the one ship, not to mention the huge PR that it's done for Ukraine, and another victory, and no doubt demoralizing Russians even further. But that's an indicator that Ukraine's weapon program is at least partly on the right track for after the war. Hopefully they can spin up more production in the meantime.
Of course. But if we say about Moskva cruiser is not so powerful like Russia say.
That's true for most of Russia's weapons.
It have a head, not have head. It had old missiles.
Yeah.
Old type of missiles, some modernized but old.
Yeah.
At most of weapons of this cruiser was quite old.
Yeah.
But Neptune, it knew our missiles, it knew very high-level missiles, good missiles, and this example shows that we can effectively use this missile against Russia fleet. Because our task is to make Russia fleet turn on big distance from our shore.
Which U.S. intel has shown happening.
Yeah. Because unfortunately our ports like Odessa, like Pivdenny and Nikolaev ports, they don't function now.
Yeah. Yeah, which is going to have effects
on
the economy.
Economy.
Well, one of the things, if you look at Russia's debacle, if you call it that, but the one thing they have the clear advantage in is artillery. They have a lot of it, and they're able to mass it, and they're able to get the drones out there to spot for it. So that's really the key weakness, I think, or the key issue that Ukraine's going to have to face. Andy is a Mozart guy, and as a commander of America's Battalion 1-3. How do you think the Ukrainians should address that?
Yeah, I think I think there should be for a couple of things. So I think counter drones. There is very little right now the Ukrainians can do to counter Russian drones, and yet Russian drones are not terribly sophisticated, right? Even the Orlan is not very sophisticated. We're just getting our feet under us. There's a tremendous amount of work to do, but that, I think, has to be a priority for us in the Mozart group to assist the Ukrainians in counter drones, because that, if we remove their ability to sense, then we remove their ability to shoot accurately. And it's easier to do that than to go after the batteries themselves, right? So that's why, for instance, we're trying to get hold of an Orlan black box. I think one was shot down in Kyiv the other day. This is a great opportunity to say, get us an Orlan black box. We can get it back to the States, reverse engineer it, And that's just one example. And anyone listening out here in the United States, if you have examples of counter-drone technology that you want to have tested here, this is a great place to do it. The other piece is, what you want to do is every time they shoot, they're making themselves a target. So a full emphasis, part of it training, part of equipping on counter-battery radar, counter-battery fires. Right now, Ukrainians they're very proficient, but they could always use more equipment devoted to that.
You bring up a good point, Al. Just is any listeners out there involved in weapons development? This is really a fantastic
great laboratory. Yeah,
they should contact Andy and the Mozart group if they want to get trials out there. I assume they'd have to deal with the ITAR issues, but that's.
I think people always throw up ITAR as being an obstacle, but frankly, it's an obstacle that could be overcome legally by getting waivers. And where there's a will, there's a way. We're bringing in stuff, as you know, from Global Assistance Global Soft Foundation, and they found a way, not past this, not around it, but legally to do this. So, I could really use some equipment specialist here, or who are just devoted to, for want of a better word, procurement, bringing this stuff in. Again, it's a bandwidth thing. Mozart Group is expanding faster than any of us expected. The last 2 days, we've had 100 volunteers, specialists. As I mentioned, we're getting doctors, and we don't want to let people down, but we at the same time we want to divide labor effectively.
You bring in the doctors and the medical training because Ukrainian Freedom Fund, which I'll plug,
absolutely,
is focused. We had lunch the other day with two guys from Azov, from the Azov regiment, which I will preface has been slandered badly by Russian disinformation. They are not the neo-Nazi group that they've been pictured as. So these guys were Georgians, and the two we met, and they were great guys,
very professional.
But they talked about a dire need for IFAKs for the first aid kits, and the problem they saw. The one recounted having seen 6 of his comrades die because they didn't have tourniquets, and we've immediately gotten a truckload of IFAKs that we're sending out to the regiment. But the medical training it really does save lives, and I think. The weapons is critical, but also saving lives, will do a lot.
In general, I should say, if you say about the Russian army, I should say that Russian army is not so powerful like it was pictured by Putin, by Russia's propaganda. But we show it now, and we see a lot of problems in logistics and communication, in planning of warfare. So, and our army, Ukrainian army, with your support and with sanction, we, of course, win this war.
Max, agree with you 100%. My concern is that as the Russians pull back into defensive positions, they're in a position of strength,
Of course.
So it is easier to defend. All I'm saying is that we need to keep supplying you with, everything that you need and thinking all the time of things that we can do to counter the Russians. And to Andy's point, and that was a very sobering lunch we had with them too. And I echo his point about the Azov. It's ridiculous. I'm getting sniped at in Twitter land back in the States for supporting, quote, Nazis in the Azov. And yet, Andy's lived here 30 years. And as you look into this, they are very, very professional. And as in even the U.S. Army, we have problems with a small minority of wackos and extremists. And so unfortunately, the Russian disinformation campaign has been remarkably effective with the U.S. population. It's not effective here, but the U.S. population, who's perhaps, I don't know, maybe more receptive to it, seems to buy into it. I want to hear a story from Max. Max,
tell us about the first days of the war.
Yeah, tell us about your own personal experiences where you went up.
The first day of the war?
The first few days of the war, you said where you went up.
Before the war, I should go to some trip. We planned trip, but this trip was not happened. And I wake up at maybe at 2 o'clock or 4 o'clock, and my bags was completed. And I sit in my car, gives my bags, and together with my son, go in our unit. So my wife and my daughter sit in another car and go on the west side of Ukraine and now live there and work like a volunteers.
Great.
We are here and we win.
And you yourself, although you're a colonel, and it's in the U.S. military colonels typically don't go up and throw grenades and shoot anti-tank weapons, but you actually went out with a group of, who did you go out with? Were they partisans or was it?
Yes, well, yes, maybe. We can say that now I'm work with like partisans.
Yeah.
So it's different people in the different level of experience and level of knowledge.
But when you...
So and if we told about our training, it's quite useful. You make a very big work for us that you help organize, invite here these instructors and help us to be more stronger.
Yeah.
Thank you for this.
It's our pleasure.
Thank you for joining today. I want to thank our guest, Max.
Thank you.
And the CEO of the Mozart Group, Andy Milburn. You can find them at www.themozartgroup.com. And I'm Andy Bain from the Ukrainian Freedom Fund, www.theuff.org. We got a new URL. It's easier to say that.
Right. Excellent.
So thank you. And next week I was just told we're going to do this twice a week now. So I guess we're getting popular. Thank you all for listening.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Max.